welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. So I know I've been a little bit quiet on here lately, and that is because we moved into this big old spooky house in August, and it really kind of took us a second to get settled in. But now that we are, I think it's time to start working on some of the decorative and restorative projects in the house. And we're going to begin in the dining room. One of the neat things about moving in here is I unearthed a bunch of old photos of what this house has looked like through time. And I saw this dining room with a different looking paper that was so beautiful. And the paper that's in here now, I would not classify it as being ugly or unattractive. It's just a little stately and bland for my taste. So I came in here and I started picking at a corner of it. And I realized that the paper I saw in those photos is still here underneath this layer. So the objective of this episode is to use a steamer, see if I can't completely remove it while not damaging the paper that's underneath, and then just bringing that paper back to life. So that is what we're going to be doing. I hope you're excited, and let's begin. My first step is to remove all of the decorations in the room. We bought this house fully furnished, and some of the pieces are incredibly beautiful, but there is a decent amount of filler, so very few of these will be coming back into this particular room. I very quickly realized that introducing moisture into this equation was actually working against me. So I ditched the steamer and found that the glue that was keeping this 1980s wallpaper affixed was very brittle, and the paper kind of just peeled off simply from there. Right here is where I realized why they originally covered this paper. There must have been some sort of water damage or repair done that caused them to lose an entire section, and they were forced to cover it. But I think I'm going to be able to mend it. Sadly, this wasn't the only area that really needed to be addressed. On the opposite side of the room, on the upper left-hand corner, there was a portion where the paper there must have been some sort of moisture issue right here, and the paper lifted from the wall. The color was all wrong, and it was not mendable. So I'm going to have to remove this and hand paint it back in. Several portions needed to be re-glued, and then I made a huge mistake right here by introducing moisture. This is not modern day wallpaper. It is antique. It's not washable. So I lost a whole bunch of pigment right here, and ultimately we'll have to go back and correct it. I'm wearing a Dita Von Teese face mask so I can look glamorous while I renovate the house. This house was built in the 1860s, and it was a common practice back then to use horsehair in the plasterwork of lath and plaster. So here is a tuft of hair from a horse that lived 150 years ago. Okay, so now what I need to do is mix paint colors to match all of these shades in this paper. I've counted and it looks like there's about 14 unique colors. I could spend so much money and frustration taking this to a paint supply store and trying to get them to match each shade, and I doubt they would ever be perfect. So what I'm doing is I've got a set of primary colors. I'm just gonna mix one at a time, speed up the process with a blow dryer, and just make sure I can match each one flawlessly. So that's what we're going to be tackling right now. It took me an entire day just to get this one main color because it couldn't be close. It had to be absolutely perfect. Otherwise, your eye would have noticed it in different kinds of light. I really thought I had it here, but in the morning light, I could see it was pulling kind of a bluish cast. So I had to work on it a little bit more, get it up on the wall, and now I feel like it's a really true match. I'm someone who's prone to repetitive motion injuries, and this much like twisting and mixing by hand nearly broke my wrist. All right, I'm not kidding. 4.5 days, that's how long that took me to make sure every single one of these colors was completely true to the original shade. But now that I've got that, there's a lattice pattern in this paper, and there's two sort of unique openings that happen or sort of repeat. And I need to get up on the wall, measure those out, and try to sketch them out and recreate them. I could attempt to freehand this, but I think there's too many to try to do that, and it just leaves too much opportunity to mess something up. So I don't want to do that. That's why I'm attempting this, and we'll see how it goes. I mentioned in a Patreon live stream about how hand mixing the paints was aggravating my wrist, and patron Grace Gorman was thoughtful enough to send me one of these drill attachment mixers, and my gosh, I'm never going back. I was really doing my best keeping the pets out of the room in case anything hazardous was going on, but Werewolf finally broke me down and she was just not tolerating being left out of the action. So now she's looking quite comfortable. So I'm not an impressionist artist, and whoever originally did this artwork was, and it's very difficult to replicate this kind of thing because as an impressionist painter, you are conveying something with simplicity that when it's finished, it makes sense to the person looking at it, but it's very hard to kind of go in and figure out exactly why they chose to do this or do that. So this part was kind of a challenge for me. To marry this all together and give it kind of an aged effect, I watered down some of the paint I was working on and sort of splotched it around, and it kind of pulled everything together. Let's take a second to talk about the age of this paper. When we originally got here, we found these photos in a drawer from the 1960s featuring the dining room, so I knew it was at least that old. Then Mary Ann Shepherd Lee, who was married to a son of the original family before he passed away at a young age, was generous enough to correspond with me. She shared images from the house which showed the room was unchanged till the 1980s. She then put me in touch with Colin Shepherd, a member of the original family who grew up here, and recalled that the paper was always there as far as he knew, and that his father, Thomas Shepherd, had touched up the ceiling and trim in the 1940s. That's the top coat of green you see in this image, which means the green paint that's visible underneath is the original coat and is the age of the paper I'm working on. Another clue came when I pried up a small piece of the bottom molding and discovered a sliver of the original 1868 paper. I then reached out to several experts and can pretty solidly guess the paper I'm restoring was installed somewhere between 1880 to 1920. A big thanks to Karen Prothero, who is an archivist with the Sanderson Design Group, Allison McDermott, who is an expert conservator, and especially Rowena Byton-Dykes from the Wallpaper History Society for helping me make an educated guess. On an exciting bonus note, there is a chance arsenic was used in the making of this paper, so I'm in the process of finding a place that can test a sample for me. So now we're going to be tackling the ceiling, the cornices, which is the crown molding, and just trying to refresh all of it. The last time the ceiling was painted was in the 1940s, so I think it's fair to say that it's time for a fresh coat. So I'm not going to be recreating exactly what was original. I am taking inspiration from that, and I'm just going to take it up a notch from there. Something about the cornices having a fresh coat of paint made them jump out at me as being kind of foreign, so I'm giving them additional depth by adding some shadows. This is a fairly simple step that wasn't too incredibly difficult, and any room that has molding around the top this can be done on, and it adds such a wow factor. When you're creating your own stencils, it's really a good idea to add bridges as you go along, and this sort of holds everything together, and then after you've stippled in your paint, you can remove the stencil and then hand paint in any of those places. If drawing is not your strong suit, I have made copies that can be printed available on Patreon. I would say my personal aesthetic is probably closest to that of a dead old lady who lives in a haunted mansion. And while I want visitors to feel cared for and comfortable, I hope they also feel a bit wary and suspicious. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm incredibly thrilled with how this room came out. I can't wait to start tackling the other rooms in the house. I've made a whole bunch of episodes on Patreon for how to make these napkins, place cards, floral arrangements. The patterns for everything is also on Patreon, so follow the link below if you want to check that out. I apologize, I have not been posting much publicly. There's just, getting into this house since getting settled in, and also sort of keeping up with my commitments on Patreon has sort of not left me with a ton of time, but I am going to be getting back into the groove of posting things publicly. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves.